random decision, a random approach. So when you start making random decisions, how is that different than strategic decisions?
A lot less stress.
What's that?
A lot less stress.
Less stress. Okay. So it's also a lot less likely to accomplish what you set out to accomplish because it's just here, it's here, it's here. Strategic decision making is things that you do in line to support some ultimate objective, some ultimate state to attain. So strategy is this ultimate, how you're going to achieve a certain thing. And really what we use in terms of business and strategic management is how you're going to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. So what is a sustainable competitive advantage?
Competitive advantage over a long period of time.
Bingo. So it's a competitive advantage over a long period of time. What is competitive advantage? What you do better than everybody else. So what you do better than everybody else over a long period of time, which yields what? Kind of the ultimate goal of the business.
Money.
What's that? Money, yeah. Profit, market share. What if it's a nonprofit? My Little Old Theater, the Red Cross. Because you can have this where profit is not the only motive.
Reputation.
Recognition, reputation, probably those are good, but I'm going to say those are good because they get you more money. But this is how I look at it. They allow you to provide more service, right? A nonprofit, if they're really successful, then they can achieve the resources so they can even provide even more service. Because the goal is not money. How many of you know that a nonprofit organization is not owned by anybody? Did you know that? So when you create a nonprofit organization, it is an entity separate from the people that are participating. All the money that's brought into it for legitimate purposes cannot go to any individual. Now, you can be the Red Cross and get $1 million a year salary, which is probably what the salary is for the Red Cross CEO. But the idea is if the Red Cross were to say, we're done, let's stop doing this, they'd have to pay off all their debt, and everything left over has to be given to another nonprofit. Because people can't own nonprofits. Their boards of directors, no, okay, I'm going, slight tangent, but. Okay, so what is strategy? It is, and I'm going to give you a couple of different definitions. The fundamental direction a firm chooses. This is kind of a generic one, right? It's the fundamental direction the firm chooses to go. Henry Mintzberg, famous guy out of McGill University in Canada, it's a pattern in a stream of actions. This almost indicates that it's something that you that identifies or becomes known after decisions are made. But that sort of belies the concept of planning a strategic series of actions. Okay, Michael Porter, let's watch a video on him if this is going to work. Please let me work. Okay, so I know that's showing me what it is, but why don't you play it? Oh, because I got that stupid this thing on. Sorry. Go away. I didn't turn that on. Anybody know how to shut that off?
Click on the cursor.
What's that?
Click on the cursor on the
That? No, where's the cursor?
next to the save button.
Next
Yeah,
to the
lower.
save button.
Under file.
Under. Okay. All right. Extra credit. You win. Thank you. Sir. All right. Anybody know who Michael Porter is? Have you heard of Michael Porter? He is the god of strategic management. He's from Harvard. This is like he really started growing up in the 80s. When I was going through my MBA program, I was probably 10 or 15 years old. Everything we learned in an MBA program that dealt with strategy was what he said. And he's got really great models of that. So I'm going to let you listen to a little bit of this because he talks about what is and what is not strategy. And I'm sure we'll get some kind of commercial first, but I'm not going to play this game. You want to hear it, so we're kind of in the right
strategy from the other kind of,
Don't get too ahead.
if we're going to have a good strategy, we've got to think clearly about what strategy is. And we've got to separate strategy from the other kind of goals and objectives and issues that managers often think about. On this slide are really the big three mistakes in terms of defining strategy.
Pay attention to the first one.
Mistake number one. My strategy is to internationalize. I hear that kind of thing all the time. My strategy is to consolidate my industry. My strategy is to ramp up my R&D budget. My strategy is to outsource more of my production. Is that a strategy? No. Those are steps that your organization may want to take. They may be good steps. They may be appropriate steps. They aren't a strategy. The strategy is what unique position will we be able to achieve? What's our advantage going to be at the end of the day as we take these steps cumulatively over time? That's the strategy part. The strategy part's about how are we going to be unique, how are we going to have an advantage, how are we going to sustain that advantage over time. The steps we take are not the strategy. But you'd be surprised how many companies get themselves fixated on a particular action that they want their organization to take, and that becomes the strategy. And of course, it then often drives the company literally off the cliff because they kind of don't understand why they're doing it and when they should stop doing it.
All right. So that's pretty good. What do you think? Makes sense? So kind of we can define something by what it's not. And he gave examples of tactics. So internationalizing a business is not a strategy, right? That's a tactic to do something else. But let me go through these things. Fundamental direction a firm chooses. Again, he talks about it. It's this thing that occurs over time. Pattern and stream of actions. What unique position will the company achieve to attain and sustain a competitive advantage over time? So that's a strategy. You know, what position that you will play in the market, how you will differentiate yourself in the market in order to achieve sustainable competitive advantage. So strategy is a result of a strategic planning process. Generally, and you'll study this in other courses that deal more specifically with strategy, but since this chapter's on it, I thought I'd bring it in. But the strategic planning process starts with, what is the company's mission? Why does the company exist? What do they hope to achieve? What's the situation? We use a couple of analytical tools. You're using one in your presentations for a country. It's called PESTO. So we'll see that. And then also there's SWOT analysis. Anybody, raise your hand if you heard of SWOT analysis. What's SWOT analysis? What's the point of SWOT analysis? What are you analyzing?
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Exactly. So what are the strengths and weaknesses? What are you analyzing there?
Kind of like things within your organization.
Bingo. Yeah. You're analyzing your strengths and weaknesses. You're internal. What's opportunities and threats? Must be there for things external to the company. Exactly. So then you create a strategy, decide how you want to compete so you can achieve the mission, put it into place. If it's working, maintain it. If it's not working, and you do that by monitoring it through controls and finding it, modify it. Right? It emerges over time. You might start here, it might end up here. So SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunities, PESTO. So there's a couple of different types of strategy. So there's what's called corporate strategy, corporate level. And a lot of these big businesses that you cover in courses, they're corporations that have multiple business units. So at the highest level, corporate strategy, you're deciding what businesses should we operate in, okay? And really, how can we operate in multiple businesses and utilize our core capabilities or our core competencies? And they talk about this a lot in the chapter. Core competencies are really important. And there's two ways you can do that. Do we do things that are consistent, like we're really good at all things in this general area called related diversification? Or are we good at something that applies to all kinds of different things, called unrelated diversification? I give two examples, and I'll show you in a second. I used to actually have General Motors here, GM, which was into everything. It was so into everything, and I used a slide set like a year ago. They had just separated General Motors into 3 separate companies. So now they're less unrelated because they've broken them out into 3 companies. But if we take a look, let's see, oh, stop that. Sorry, I gotta quit whining about this, but these are supposed to just pop open. Oh, of course I'm here. There we go. So if we look at this, what does Nestle's do? What businesses are they in? It's related diversification as the example. What do these things all have in common?
Food products.
The food, the consumables, right? Pet food, various things, food. How about when we look here? What do?
A whole bunch of different stuff.
Real estate, healthcare, life sciences, retail, but, you know, all over the place. So they've decided that we want to compete in a wide variety of businesses. They're unrelated, but what's probably some of the core connection between them? Because if they're totally unrelated, that could be a handful. What do you think they might have for core competencies to be able to successfully compete in that area? What's one thing you can think of that would apply to all businesses? Come on, let's go. All right.
Sourcing raw materials,
What's that?
sourcing raw materials.
Okay, sourcing, perfect. You know, purchasing, R&D, maybe innovation. Maybe, and this was General Motors. General Motors, anybody know the history of General Motors and Jack Welch? And I mean, what was General Motors' big strength? Kind of crazy, because all businesses utilize it. It was management. They're like, we can manage anything. So they went in and said, we can manage anything. We're going to go in every direction. Any place where we can be number 1 or number 2, we'll play. If we can't be the first or second in that market, we're going to get out of it. So they would go in, take over something, buy it, it'd work out, they keep it. They go in, oh, we're not 1 or 2, let's get out of it. But their strength was management. They trained managers. They had a place called Croftville in upstate New York where they would send people, and it was like a religious experience from a business management perspective. You learn how to manage according to the General Motors way, or General, yeah, not General Motors. GE, not General Motors. Did I say General Motors? That was stupid to me. They're not diversified, they make cars. General Electric, GE. All right. So one thing that Porter talks about, you know, when he talks about strategies, and this is where he's really well known, he's come up with this concept of there are really only 2 strategies, right? It's called the Porter's generic strategies, cost leadership or differentiation. All right, then they acquiesce and say, we'll give you a third, but it's going to be either cost or differentiation, but with a subset of the market. So that's called a focus or niche strategy. So what do you think the cost leadership strategy is? That's going to guide your every decision. The way you set up the business, the way you hire people, the way you train people. If you're cost leadership, what's the goal?
Limiting your expenses.
You're going to deliver what the market wants in the broadest sense at the lowest possible price. And everything you do will be to achieve that price. Now you might go, so you're going to have pay poor wages. Not necessarily. You might pay really high wages because you're going to attract people that have productivity output of 3 or 4 people. Anybody, you know the concept of coding, typing out computer code? There's a study that was done between an average coder and a really good one, like, you know, lines per minute or whatever, lines per hour, whatever you measure it. What do you think the difference between an average that you pay full freight, full fee, and somebody who's just really good? The difference between those 2 outputs, according to the study. What would be realistic?
5 more lines, so
5 more lines there? Thank you for weighing in. Yeah, let's say 5 more lines equals 5%, 10%, right? So if you could, for the same price, get a person who can do 50 lines and somebody who can do 55, right? You would go, I want the 55 because I get a little bit from it more for my money. What if I told you the difference between the average and a good one was 800%? A really good coder can code a lot more than the average. So are you only going to pay him 5% more? You could have a low-cost production by paying double the going rate because you're still up, what, 400%? I mean, just simple math, and trust me, don't trust my math. But that's the concept. Cost differentiation doesn't mean cheap. It just means you have to try to find everything you do to get the cost out of the production and the service delivered. So what about differentiation? Okay, let me stop for a second. Give me some examples of companies that follow Porter's generic cost strategy. You know them, you shop at them every day, maybe you hate them. Walmart. Walmart's all about cost. Right? That's it. Why would you go anywhere else? You know you can go to Walmart and generally get it cheaper than anywhere. Same thing, nothing fancy, got pretty much the run-of-the-mill product, but you're gonna go to Walmart because it's cheaper, generally. What else? So that's in the retail sector. What about in the automobile sector? Kia. Is that a deluxe automobile? Not so much. Good cars, cheap. Owned 2 that my wife totaled out. And we got out of 3 of it. Had her on a Subaru and mounted a big steel grid on. No, kidding. Both instances were not her fault. So let's talk about differentiation. So what does differentiation strategy mean? You've got this market.
Tapping into different niches.
What's that?
Tapping into different niches.
Well, at first, differentiation is tapping into different things that people are willing to pay more money for. So you're still looking at a broad market, people that are in the market for something, and you're looking at what can we offer of value that we can charge more money for. And if we can put together the perfect collection of features, benefits and features, it's the marketing terminology, that people are willing to choose us over any of our competitors because they like our uniqueness for the value. That's how we can compete in differentiation.
Well, GM's strategy back in the day was to have as many possible different, try to have the perfect mark for each person. And so they had Chevy, GMC, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Cadillac. You had like 5 or 6 different Buick. They had like every kind. They had all these different brands for all these different people.
So they're trying to appeal to that different group. So one thing Porter, and it'd be interesting to see what Porter would say. How successful were they? Are they? They've been to the brink of bankruptcy and pulled back several times. And he might say, you're trying to be everything. So you're trying to be cost, you're trying to be differentiation, you're really not any of those. And his argument is if you're not winning and being the best at these generic strategies, you're not going to own the market.
Yeah, I mean the strategy now is just base brand luxury. Most Toyotas, Lexus, Fords, Lexus.
Those 2 generic strategies. Yeah, and one of my professors, again, great guy, love him. He's like, it all comes down to this, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to cost. So it's cost for the differentiation. So you can say cost or differentiation. How much for that differentiation? Because it's going to come back to cost. What are some examples of businesses or firms, you even alluded to a couple, that use differentiation strategy? Just in cars.
Oh,
So we got GM, we got Chevy, we got Kia. That's the cost. What's the differentiation?
The models,
Company, the brand, yeah?
it was just, what market you're trying to tap into, right? Toyota is all about,
I'm going to say,
you're going to drive that car to the ground.
right. I'd still put Toyota generally at cost. Mercedes, BMW, Rolls-Royce, Lexus, those would be differentiation. You're not getting, those are expensive. You're willing to pay additional money because you want those features. And then in niches, you say, let's look at just this segment of the market and go for cost or differentiation. Like, let's just look for young men. We're going to give them the deluxe truck. We're going to give them the cheap truck. Or young ladies. We're going to give them the fashion or the cheap, And I was going to, one of these that I use as competitor to retail, although Walmart, They are retail, but they're not fashion retail necessarily, although I do all my shopping at Walmart for all my clothes, much to my wife's chagrin. But what's a competitor in the differentiation space to retail for a clothing store?
Like Ross and Organics.
Those are all cost. Those are all cost. Ross is actually factory second. TJ Maxx, I think, is odd lots. All cost. All right, who spends tons of money on clothes and goes to fancy stores? Be honest with us. We need you for this example. How about Neiman Marcus? Okay. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say like workout stuff like Aloe and Lululemon, but that's not like high end.
Lululemon is high dollar,
Oh, yeah.
fancy. What is it? It's an athletic pant that costs a fortune, right? But Neiman Marcus is a good example.
Yeah.
It's deluxe. It's luxury. Macy's used to be more so that. You know, if you looked at, you know, Walmart, Penny's, Macy's, Neiman Marcus, you can see this spread. All right. So now we're going to jump back into what the text says. This is just sort of give you a background and a setup on the strategy. So the text says, strategy refers to the actions managers take to attain the goals of the firm. Actually, those are the tactics. Strategy is this other thing, but we'll go with it for now. What's the goal of the firm? To maximize shareholder value. You'll always learn that. You'll hear that in ethics classes and all your business classes. What's the ultimate objective of an organization, of a business organization? What are the duties of management? To maximize shareholder value. Actually, there's like a legal argument. If you're running a company and your goals are not to maximize shareholder value, you're not adhering to your fiduciary responsibility. You're hired to maximize the value of the people who own the company. Goal to maximize it comes down to dimensions. Profitability, meaning how much money you make off of the production of your, or the distribution of your services, but it also is growth. How much do you make, and how does that number change over time? Is it continually growing? So the goals are good profit that continues to increase. So value creation, what is value creation? It's just what are you able to achieve getting money from a customer to buy your product that exceeds your cost of producing or making it available. So, yeah, I went through that in great detail. So where in a business do you have the opportunity to create value, right? So if we talk just generically a business, now what are the elements of a business that are really the key places that people look to for differentiation, or that an organization can really find ways to create value and be more competitive? Just generically. I have it on the slide. Don't look if you want to test yourself. What do you create value in a business? In what dimensions? How? What's a business? What's it all about, Alfie? Sorry, that's a movie.
Productions and operations.
Making the thing, right. Making the thing. Operations is a broad sense, but yeah, producing. You know, if you buy something and it's crappy and it doesn't work and it's supposed to fit with something else and it doesn't fit because it's poorly made, not so good. If it's dirt cheap, I might tolerate that. So productions, what else?
I'd say marketing.
Marketing and letting people know the value, right? Hey, look at our product, here's the value. We can really show you the value if we have a really good marketing approach. We can show you the value and you'll realize you want to buy it from us. A couple more.
R&D.
Research and development. That's where it's creative. The idea of creating the product, the idea of creating the processes that build the product, you can extract value out of that. And then the last one is, oh wait, I don't have it on here. It should be customer service, so I'll show you on another chart. And then there's the overarching ones that are called secondary, otherwise known as supporting. So value chain is a very classic thing used in strategic management talk. Some call it primary and secondary, others call it primary and supporting. The supporting are the ones that support or overarch all of the primary. So HR, obviously, you got to bring people in, you got to train them, you got to incentivize them, motivate them, keep them directed. Information systems helps you manage information, obviously, helps you decide, keep an eye on things, help you communicate across departments so that if they're integrated, that they can understand what's going on. And then finally, the infrastructure, that's a sort of broader category. We'll cover these a little bit in detail. So if we look at this, we've got R&D, we've got production, marketing and sales, and customer service. Really, after the sale, how well you manage people, how well the product holds up, if there's a problem, how well you deal with it. So primary activities are used to design, create, and deliver the product. Marketing, support, and after sales services is an important one. We talked about production, marketing, sales, just the ability for that marketing and sales component to increase people's perceived value. Right? They will gather what people want and send it back to R&D. Hey, we're finding out there in the universe people want this product that doesn't exist. Boom, R&D takes it and starts making it, and boom, now you're competitive in that area. Customer service really is just how well you interact and keep that customer, keep them loyal so that they continue to support your product. Support activities, yeah, I think I covered that. Yeah, logistics is one as well, that how well you move stuff within an organization, from suppliers to the organization and to the distributors. And the infrastructure, really, organization structure, which is the hierarchy. We'll cover these in the next few chapters. You know, how do you organize a business? Is it all top down? If I said that top down, what does that mean to you? You're working at a business that's top down.
You get all orders or information from the top level and then slowly go down.
Central control. No, you can't do this. Yes, you can do that. Here's what we're going to do. The lower you get in the line, you just do what you're told. You just do what you're told, right? That's a centralized control system. How about decentralized?
It's more free and flexible.
The argument is you let people that are closer to the action make some decisions because they'll probably have a better sense. And this is classic. You will have a person in an office that will make a change to the organization because they think this would be good. They have no concept of what's really going on in the ground. And it seems rational and logical to make that change, and then they do it, and the place spirals out of control because it's not connected to what's really happening. So there's arguments for central control, there's arguments for decentralized control, and we'll cover those in the next chapter. HR, you know, I think HR is pretty good. That's the best place, it runs the place, but it's really about making sure you have the right people in the position, the train, and then through compensation practices, to attract, motivate, and retain them. All right, so here's an example of the value chain as if you were operating from a cost control perspective. So if you wanted to go, what decisions, how would I structure my value chain? Right? So what are the things in the production, or the, let's say inbound logistics. In this example, they use slightly different versions. So inbound logistics, operations, outbound marketing, and service. So this is the value chain this textbook uses, but it's also a model that's used. What are some of the ways that you would use if you had a cost competitive thing? What would you look at, let's say, for inbound logistics? What are ways where you could increase productivity by reducing costs? Did you read that? You just have to have organizational efficiency in design. So you don't want to have wasted movement. So in this case, it says effective layout. Make it so that somebody can pull in, drop a product, put another one on the truck, and pull out. Not go in, stop, unload, drive away, come back. You know, that would cost you time and money. If we look up here at human resources, how would you minimize cost there? Just figure out how to reduce employee turnover, right? And how would you do that? How would you, using cost, trying to keep the cost down, what would be some techniques you might use, tactics, to support the strategy of cost leadership?
Maybe a better onboarding process.
Better, start them strong where they feel like they're part of the organization. Anybody ever gone to a work environment where you walk in and like nobody really talks to you, you're not really sure where you're supposed to be? Yeah, is that fun or what? You know, you're like borderline useless for the first few weeks and sometimes even months because you just don't know who's doing what and what's going on. So if you actually start with the ground running, you put somebody with a buddy, you give them access to all the information systems, they can start functioning much earlier. So that would help drive down the cost. One, they'd stick around longer. You're not replacing them every month or two. But again, this is the concept of how you would use, with the strategy of cost leadership, how you would apply these different decisions across the value chain. And here's one for differentiation. Now it's going to be obviously different. So you would probably invest more money where it costs a little more, but you'd get some higher level of output from it. what do they say about HR? Programs to attract talented engineers and scientists. So you might focus more on that value chain activity that says, hey, you know, if we're going to be great at R&D and design, we need the best. And this is really what goes on at Apple and Microsoft and some of those. They spend a lot of money trying to get the top talent because they go, this is where we're going to make it. They, you know, from my experience, I worked at Cornell. Everybody there, Cornell is probably the 4th or 5th leading computer science program in the country. Everybody wanted to work at Yahoo, Microsoft, or Google. And they worked really hard to get there, but you know, they were very selective as well, so that was hard. If you could get there and you weren't from one of those schools, some magic happened. But yeah, so how about technology? You want to have the best technology, the most current technology, so that you can operate and create advantage. Service would be a great example for that. All right, so we'll stop with that for a sense. You got the strategy, you got where in the organization, the functional areas within the organization you can apply different approaches to achieve that strategy. Now we'll talk a bit about the concept of how you want to approach the market. We're actually going to get into the basic strategies for international business. So one of the goals here is you want to expand your own market, right? So why do we go and develop international organizations? Because we have something of value, we want to try to get access to a bigger market. Couple of different ways. So you want to go into an organization, you want to go into a location, or you want to bring your products and services to a market where you can really utilize your value creating activities to the maximum. You want to use the things that give you competitive advantage at home. You want to try to go out and you want to start to try to achieve that in another environment, another country. So part of the idea, if you look at the last bullet here, to be successful, oops, I didn't leave, this is a touch screen, sorry. To be successful in foreign markets, this is kind of the critical thing, right? You're going to go to an organization, you're going to go to a market, you're going to go into an environment where you have something that you can offer that is giving you the competitive advantage over the people, over the organizations in that market, right? So if you're going to go in there, you have to compete against somebody. You're going to use the same things you would use within your own home market, your domestic market, as you start to go out. After you're there, you're going to have to then compete, and that's going to be a changing environment. So a couple of different ways. The first one, or one of the things to look at is the concept of location economies. And location economies are deciding where you can do something where it's the best place in your value chain to do that particular function. There's some reason why that environment, that physical area, that the government regulations makes it, if you're going to do, let's say, R&D, for example, Dylan and I were talking about the shoe business, right? I'm suggesting you want to go and take advantage of location economies of Italian shoe designers. So you're going to go there and you're going to do your design work in that country. You don't have to build them there, you know, but you're going to want to be able to take advantage of the fact that that's the best place for that important part of your business. And you would look at that across all your different value chain activities. Where's the best place to do customer service? What's an example we saw first day of class where you would have a great advantage by doing post-sales service? Actually, it would even be sales service by using another country.
India.
You think way back before midterm, back to the first day.
India.
India, right. So it was decided by that company, we can get the quality of work we know. It sounds to me like a cost competitive strategy for this company. Kitschy products, nothing special, they're just trying to drive down their cost. But they said, let's do that particular component in that country. That will be a competitive advantage for us. So they're taking advantage of what's called location economies. And again, these work generally, unless having things distributed at different locations results in higher transaction costs, as in transportation, or the risk associated with an unstable, let's say, political environment. So in general, you're going to go, that's the place to do it. If there's some other things that might threaten that, obviously if you're making heavy things like bags of cement, it's hard to write off that location when you have to pay a fortune to ship it to another location, to utilize it for the rest of your process. Or if you feel instability in the organization, the government will cause you to not be able to actually carry out your product production. So another thing is the concept of experience effects. So I gave you an example of this with Intel chips. What does experience effect mean? You can paraphrase it, but in your own words, in your own experience. Let me ask you, is it easier to be a college student when you're a junior than it is when you're a freshman? Come on, we're in the same class together. What? No? You think, is it harder now than freshman seminar? Okay, that was a bad example of it. Okay, probably because the, okay, maybe the content of the courses gets more challenging, but the basic functioning on a campus and figuring out how to do homework and how to, does that not get a little easier? Okay, because you get used to it. You start off, you try to do it. If you're like me when I was in college, each semester you get a new approach to managing your notes, and you divide your, and you get different notebooks, then you divide a notebook, and, it never got better at it. It just got easier, I guess. So, but the idea is the more you do something, you learn through the process. And if you have a high volume sale where you're actually able to have a large market, you produce more product, you get a faster learning curve, right? Faster experience. You benefit from that. Also the same thing with learning, how to actually execute and do something, right? When employees start working on a project, it's hard to figure out what to do. After they do it for a little bit, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I know this could be done a little differently, this could be done a little differently. I'll give you an example from a play I directed. Anybody ever seen the play Little Shop of Horrors? Okay, so the play requires this very large 3-part puppet. Anybody seen the movie Little Shop of Horrors? You guys don't get out. Come on, go out and rent some good Broadway videos. So Little Shop of Horrors requires that you have a small plant, a slightly larger plant, which is a guy sitting with a little outfit, and the final puppet is this massive plant that 3 people operate. Somebody operates the top, somebody's got the wings. Anyhow, in the process of producing this play, when we started running it for technical rehearsal, people couldn't do it. They would stop during the rehearsal. No, we can't do this. It's not working. And I'm like, relax. We'll do this until it gets more set in your mind. You get physical muscle memory. You'll understand when it occurs and how to best do it. And people swore as we're going through this rehearsal process. I mean, really, probably the worst experience I had directing, working on a play. Just couldn't be done. We've over-designed it. And by the 3rd performance, in front of an audience, people were standing around smoking cigarettes backstage during the period of time that they used to freak out. Because they come in, get it done, and be backstage, got that done. Because they learned just the process, takes a while to figure out what's the shortcut, what's the thing that's unnecessary. And that again occurs when you have the ability to have more productivity, more production, you go through that cycle more. And then what's economies of scale? What's the simple mathematical principle of economies of scale?
Variable costs go down.
Bingo. Actually, fixed costs go down, right? So the fixed costs are amortized over a larger number of products. The variable cost, yeah, that's that accounting stuff. But at the end of the day, the more production you have, the lower you can increment each part of each unit produced to share in the fixed cost. And if you have 10 things, that's expensive. If you have 100,000 things, it's tiny. The cost of building a factory to build 10 things is enormous. The cost of building a factory to build 100,000 things, not so enormous. Okay, so another thing that also businesses have to look at in terms of adapting a strategy to work internationally is what are the pressure for cost reduction? Meaning, how important is cost? How much pressure is there to be against the way you produce stuff? If you're doing a cost leadership approach, even if you're not, if you're in a cost situation and the pressure is high to control the cost, this is going to affect where and how you do your business, right? So one of the ways to try to do it is to reduce cost by having a universal product type, meaning you create something that you can sell across many markets so that you get economies of scale, you know, you have the learning curve, you have all the benefits of those effects because you create it once, you mass produce it, and you can distribute it. You can even use the same marketing approach generally, slight tweaks, but you can distribute that over a greater thing, right? If there's competitors that come in a low-cost thing, now you're going to actually be fighting down on that cost as well. So if there's cost pressure because other competitors can achieve the same as you, then you have to go, what's the best way for us to handle this? What's the best way to reduce those costs in terms of the structure or the strategy where we're going to operate? How about local responsiveness? So in a universal product is one that people generally across the large market or multiple markets will say, that's sufficient, I can live with that. But what if there is something about a market that says, we don't want it exactly like that? Can you think of a product? I mean, this is really important for the projects you're going to work on. When you bring your product or service into these countries, is it going to meet the needs of the consumer in that market? And what things would be, you would assume to be very generic, universal, versus things that might not be so?
I think of like certain type of restaurants offering different meats in different countries.
Yeah. Well, a good example from outsourced was what? Not going to get a lot of beef restaurants in India, right? Because that's not culturally acceptable. When I was in Egypt, when I learned about this, so there are two products that worked: Perch shampoo and Parasol laundry detergent. So Perch shampoo, they're both made by Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble had to have a separate recipe formula for Perch because it didn't work with the general Egyptian's hair. Different, physically a different hair texture. So they had a separate in-country version of Perch. But Parasol, it's laundry detergent. They could ship the same stuff we wash with here over there. Two different products. But if the customer demand requires some localized content, then that prevents you from being able to do the universal, large-run, high economies of scale production. So then, this is wrapping this chapter up. There are basically four approaches, strategic approaches to doing international or business overseas. And it's based on this concept of the pressure to contain cost and the pressure to create some localized version. So if you have low local responsiveness, meaning you don't really, a universal product will work. People, a CD is a CD, Queen is Queen, If you're a producer of American, actually that's British, I'm not sure what label it is, but that's so funny, I should use this example. So when I was in Egypt, I could buy a little cassette for $1.50 in the US, what's that, 5 Egyptian pounds. Made in Heaven, anybody familiar with Queen? Made in Heaven, anybody like that? It's great album, great album. So I thought they were selling bootleg tapes at this store, the pharmacy of all things. I'm like, okay, ethically, do I buy a bootleg tape? Well, I'm in Egypt. I went into Egypt, do as the Egyptians, and so I pay my 5 Egyptian pounds, and I get this tape. And I read on it, and it's an authorized copy sold in Egypt. So it's actually a legitimate copy. And I love the album. I bought a used truck when I was there, and I'm listening to it all the time. My wife really loves Queen. And then I get back to the United States and I'm listening to it on like a CD, and all of a sudden there's like 3 more songs on the CD. I'm like, what's this from? Oh, it's from Made in Heaven. And so I look, and in order to fit it on my cheap CD, my cheap cassette, they just cut off like 3 of the songs. I'm like, okay, so they localized it cost-wise because that's what they couldn't do. They couldn't charge the full freight for that thing and create a specialized cassette. So they took a standardized cassette, stuck it in there, and just dropped a couple of songs off it. So it's kind of a treat for me later when I got to hear there was even more. But the idea that, in that sense, they tried to universalize it, had to do it a little bit localized because people weren't going to be able to purchase. The market doesn't have that kind of money. So again, high responsiveness to local, if it has to be high local responsiveness, you're going to use a location strategy. If it has to be high cost, you're going to have a global strategy. So just as we talk through these, why is the high cost pressure, a global strategy, gonna be the best way to go? Just, I know I'm giving you a lot and maybe I'm confusing the heck out of you, but just think through it. Why would, if cost is important, there's a lot of pressure to maintain cost, why is a globalized strategy the best choice? What do you get with a globalized strategy?
Cost reduction and low pressure for local responses.
How do you get cost reduction?
Use local economies.
What's that?
Local.
So it can be, yep, you can benefit from local economies. There's another really big important one.
The product is standardized, so you don't have to make a bunch of different types of stuff.
Yep, and that leads to economies of
Scale.
scale. Yeah. You can just mass produce it. And maybe if you don't even need to benefit from localized economies, you clearly would, but you could make it all in the United States and just ship it everywhere. Make 1 million of them and ship them everywhere, because it's the same, right? So, what is transnational strategy? So if you can imagine international, this is literally the international. You make it at home and you ship it abroad. Boom. Global standardized strategy, maybe you do the local economies where you're trying to figure out where's the best place to produce it, but it's still a package of benefits, a package of characteristics that is distributed pretty much as is across a very large market. This one clearly has to be tweaked to fit the needs of the local market. What's the transnational?
Would it be neighboring countries, or would that still be considered international?
Well, the way the book described it, could be neighboring, could be international, could not be neighboring. Come on, it's a small world, man. Everybody's a neighbor now. We're all just one click away. One container ship away. So this tends to be kind of a one-point centric focus, right? From home, domestic, to abroad. This one, still a little bit of that, but placing it out. This one, you're kind of jumping into the country, being a little more specific to the country. So what about that one?
That's where you're eliminating your own company's national basis.
You're everywhere. You don't look at it from like a central point of view. You're going, plus it's challenging because you have two things you have to address. I've got to be making products that are fit to the market, and I can't be doing it at whatever the cost occurs. I have to fight for competitive pricing. So I'm really trying to integrate both of those, and the best way to do that is to share, and the way the book really talks about it is, this is taking all of your internal expertise and going out and trying to use your core capabilities to find the best solution in those other environments. The transnational is saying you're going to need to rely on all of your production and all of your locations to share their knowledge and information to the point where you exist out there and interact and create, in a sense, across all places, but specifically if it's localized, you'll utilize something from one of your production areas, maybe local economies of scale, but you'll also look at the fact that, okay, we now have expertise that we're learning in India that we can apply over here in China, okay? One of the things the book says, it's really hard to do, to actually be super competitive when it's cost and it's high responsiveness. You can even go back to Porter, he's like, you're trying to do both. And you generally can do one or the other if you try to do both. If you land in the middle, and actually the book gives you that example of that efficient frontier. If you look at one of the graphs that shows you sorry, I might be giving you the wrong companies because I'm looking at the 25 version of the book. Anyhow, the idea that there's efficient frontier where you maximize your cost and your differentiation, but if you don't get right on that frontier, if you're not the most differentiated, you're not the least costly, you're probably not going to survive the competition if you're not the best at either one of those. So really, the globalized standard strategy looks to recap productions from economies of scale, learning, and location economies, as we covered. It avoids customization, right? If you have to customize, you can't necessarily take and benefit from economies of scale. Then again, location strategy, when you have to customize, when you have to have some attributes of your product or service that is fit to the location, that they can't be used across everything, you reduce your economies of scale. International, really, just taking home country products and moving them abroad. I think I've covered all these. And then the transnational, right? You're really trying to find a way to balance between two very challenging areas, but utilizing your network of all of your companies. So it does evolve over time, right? And that's one of the things that occurs is you may start here, but as competitive pressures come on, people see you. They want to try to have some of your market share, so they start to imitate what you do. And one of my business professors in Egypt always said the worst position to be is number one, because everybody's trying to knock you off, right? Because, and what are you going to do? Everybody is working really hard and positioning themselves to take and copy everything you do and then exceed that. Who do you get to copy? But as long as you're number one and you can maintain it, you can make lots of money, you know, not a bad position to be in. Okay. Any thoughts, questions? Should I go through that all again? Yeah, that would be painful. I understand. What are the things of value that you may have picked up from this that are going to inform how you work on your business project? Yes, ma'am. You raised your hand. That's so nice. You just shout it out because nobody else is talking. Sorry.
Localization and customization of the products that we're going to do, because that's a big deal.
Good. I mean, those are good things to be aware of, because if you try to introduce a product into a market that is not receptive, good luck. What else? How about when you do research? What are you going to be looking for in terms of, let's just say in terms of your competitors?
Cultural values and awareness.
Okay.
Like
See
what
how
the value,
cultural
yeah.
values might influence the receptiveness to your product. Mm-hmm. It's important that you do look at competitors, because you're not going to go into a market. I mean, it's make-believe, right? We're making this stuff up, but we have to make believe where we're looking at what would the actual conditions be. And I do evaluate, when you use a different phrase, and the rubric that I'll grade these with is how probable are you, how viable is this project? So you do need to know, if you go in there, if there's absolutely no competitor, that's great. Maybe there's no market, or maybe it just, you're ahead of the game and you're going to now corner the market. But what if there are competitors? How are they competing? And how will you compete against them? And you need to touch on that. Anything else? What else would you take from this in terms of, from a business perspective, from how to approach going in and doing this project? How many are going to go for cheap? Going to go for cost? That's what I would do. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a cheapskate. I'm like, okay, can I give you the best price? When I ran my tax business that I competed with an H&R Block, I just went, hey, that guy has got to pay 30% of his fee to H&R Block for the franchise fee. I'm going to charge 30% less. So what do I got? I'm making the same amount of money as them, and I'm 30% less expensive. So I went in, great service at a cheap price. I didn't give them a lot of special, didn't have fancy folders and all the H&R Block stuff, but it allowed me to compete. I had 1,200 customers by my second year. It was pretty darn good. Actually, I made $50,000 my fourth year, and I only worked 40 hours. I was very pleased with that, because I had actually moved to upstate New York, had it all set up, had it running. You knew you could come to us and get a great tax return for 30% less than the other places in town. And that's exactly how I competed. And then I moved because my wife took a job teaching, so I ended up hiring I actually sold my business to the first person I hired. Her name is Teresa. And I went down, I did all the payroll, I set everything up, I trained everybody, and I recorded my time. And at the end of the year, I put $50,000 into the bank, and I had about 40 hours, just a little less. I didn't have to get overtime. No, there's no overtime in the business. Anyhow, so competing at cost is a valuable approach. But if you were to differentiate, how many of you think you might try to create a really unique product or service that you're going to charge extra for? Anybody? You're looking at each other. Is that you guys?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. You're free to do whatever you want, but I do need you to be thinking of this because I'm going to expect this when you say, here's the approach we're going to take with our product or service. You can't come in and go, we're just going to go in and sell. We are going to be unique product and charge more. We're going to come in and produce a great product and be the best price. So I'm going to say, you got to be one of those two, or you're probably going to fail. Not the course, the imaginary business. You'll have an imaginary business fail. I'll give you that. All right, let's call it quits. Oh, remember, what you all got to do sometime on Thursday?